Hello, this is Andrew Farova, and welcome to Horn Sessions. This is the fourth interview in our Meet Your Teacher series, and I'm sitting here today with Erik Ralske at the beautiful Brevard Music Festival in Western North Carolina. Erik, how are you doing today?
Great, good to be here.
Thanks so much for joining me. I'm looking forward to learning from you, and I know that our listeners can't wait to hear what you have to say. So we'll jump right in. Where do you teach, and how long have you been teaching there?
Well, I've been at Juilliard for 13 years, and when I came back to New York, I'm a New Yorker by birth, but when I came back in 1993, I joined the New York Philharmonic. I was teaching at Manhattan School of Music, and soon after that, I joined the Mannes faculty. I'm still on the faculty at Mannes. It's been about 23 years there. Summertimes, too, I do things like this. We're here in Brevard this summer. Aspen Festival, I've done most of the last 12 years, COVID and whatnot, summer off here or there. And in Taiwan, at the Taipei Music Academy and Festival, which I've been done for 5 years, taking this summer off. I got my oldest son going to college next month, and that's an August festival, so it seemed like a good summer maybe to take that summer off. But my principal teaching has been at Juilliard. That's where my focus and energy has been for the last 13 years.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you obviously do a tremendous amount of teaching in a lot of places. I think for this interview, we're going to focus on your teaching at Mannes and at Juilliard. I'm curious to know, how do you balance those two teaching responsibilities?
Yeah, it's tough. Well, first of all, there's the balance between my principal job, which is at the Met Opera, and which is demanding in terms of hours and energy. But anybody who teaches and performs knows that there's that dual benefit for teacher and for student, of what you exercise in your daily life as a performer, and honing that information and passing it on is really important. But the balance between the two schools, there was a year or maybe two where I was teaching at all three conservatories in New York. I was still at Manhattan School of Music and at Mannes and at Juilliard. And I found that in having to drop one, because that was just way too much energy going into too many different directions. It's 3 sets of juries, 3 sets of entrance exams, et cetera, et cetera. So in paring it down to 2 schools, I've always had Mannes being the smaller school, and I've always had a very small studio there. And it's not a conflict of interest for me. I see that the students I have had in the past at Mannes, maybe students who haven't had the early start, haven't had the opportunities that some of the students who are a little more competitive at the same age might be. And yet there are people who you can hear the talent, and they just need a place to develop and play a little catch-up. And I've had some great success at Mannes in where they go there, and they're more of the big fish in the smaller pond. It's a much smaller school than a place like Juilliard. And by the time they're ready for grad school, they're ready to compete with the best of them. And so a number of them have gone on very successful careers. In fact, my last student he graduated with a job. He came in for a master's degree, and, a month before graduation, he nailed down a job. So very happy about that. Now, looking at this fall, we had a lot of openings at Juilliard. So I'm not taking anybody at Mannes this year. It's kind of like a year off. I didn't replace anybody outgoing at Mannes, and I've got now 11 students at Juilliard next fall. So it's now all of my energy goes there, but it's really easy because it's right across the street from the Met. And I enjoy concentrating at this moment all my energies into that one studio. And we'll look forward to that challenge this year. My kids have grown up. Some, like I said, one's gone off to college, and the one that's still at home is more independent. So I find myself at this point in my life having more time to dedicate towards teaching.
Wow, so I can't even believe you used to teach at all 3.
Yeah.
And that had to have been difficult.
It didn't last long, like I said, and I was sorry to let MSM go, but it was, I had to make a choice, and there might have been more conflict of interest there. Just, not to say anything about the level at Mannes, it's just that much the same pool of students you're drawing from at those 2 schools. So.
Well, let's learn a little bit more about the studio makeup at these schools. So let's start with Juilliard. How many undergrad, master's, doctoral students do you have there? And are there any teaching assistantships available?
Yeah, good question. Well, the school itself, we usually carry a total of about 14 to 16 horns. That's what makes the school function, where There's enough horns to do most of their large-scale projects, and nobody's sitting around, not twiddling their thumbs and not feeling like they're being challenged. So that's the number that works for us. And the makeup of my studio next year, well, I say I have 11 students. The first thing that, at least from my perspective, that makes it a little bit more doable is that two of them, we have an interesting procedure, I guess, at Juilliard, or option, I should say, for students, that two of them are splitting their lessons between myself and the other two teachers. So one is sharing between myself and Jen Montone, the other one is sharing lessons with me and Erik Ralske. So that's like a half-time student for me. So the net is 10 hours a week of teaching for me. Like I said, it's just being across the street makes it easy. And, if I finish rehearsal at the Met, got either the rest of the afternoon and evening to do some teaching, or between a rehearsal and a performance, you can easily get 4 lessons in. So that's how I balance it. But the makeup of the studio for next year, I have 4 incoming freshmen, 1 new student who's a transfer, and I think he'll probably be placed in probably the sophomore level, but I don't know yet. It depends on how he fares on placement exams to see what credits will transfer. I've got 2 juniors that are returning. I've got 1 senior, she's finishing up. And I've got 2 grad students. One's in his first year. He did his undergraduate degree at Juilliard in Erik Ralske's studio. And now he's joining my studio, but splitting his lessons with Jen Montone. So, by the time he finishes his grad degree, he'll spend time with all 3 of us on faculty, which is really the kind of great collaboration I'm happy to say that exists at Juilliard now. It's a real team of the 3 of us who are teaching there currently. And then I also have one that's returning. He'll be a second-year master's, and he'll be finishing up and graduating next year. So that's my studio of 11, and that's how it breaks down.
Got it. How about at Mannes?
Mannes, I got nobody next year. Like I said, I decided, I anticipated and saw that it was just one of those things that happens sometimes cyclically, where we've suddenly had everyone graduating, undergrad and grad students this year. And we also had, for good reason, we ended up with vacancies in the studio because we had just like a record number of students who got jobs at Juilliard. And so that's a good problem to have. Yeah, we were in quite a role in the last 4 or 5 years now of Juilliard students really doing well out in the professional world. So we started out the year with, I believe it was 15 horns, and 5 people got jobs that took them away from school, like immediately. And we were down to about 10 horns, maybe it was 11, I can't remember exactly, by the end of the school year. But with then a couple of the ones who were graduating were planning on coming back for master's degrees and had applied and had gotten in, then 1 jobs, 1 to Rochester Symphony and 1 to your very own orchestra.
Yes. While we're on this glorious subject of winning jobs, I would love to talk about Paige. So Paige Quillen is the incoming assistant utility horn in the Charlotte Symphony where I play, and Paige is a student of Erik's. First off, congratulations to you. I know that's got to be tremendously exciting to be in that point in your career where you're having students that are going out and winning orchestral jobs. What does that feel like from your perspective?
Well, I would, partly in answer to that question, I would say congratulations to Paige. I always say, as a teacher, they have to do the work. It's their success, truly, and they should own it and be proud of it. I feel my role as a teacher is really important. Yes, of course, I know I help students to get to where they want to be. I know, hopefully, that I'm providing really critical information for them to help them get to where they want to go. And that's basically what we do, is we, just help students achieve the success that they, at a young age, dream of. And that's really satisfying for me. It's a great feeling just to see someone like Paige succeed right out of the gate, at a young age. I think she's 22, maybe 23, just having finished her undergraduate degree. And she's got a really, really nice job, well-paying, in a great orchestra with a great horn section, and a really nice vibe from what everyone tells me. And I think that's a great way to start a career. So it's just very satisfying to me, but I don't like to feel like I own it, because I also don't want to own people's failures, people who don't work and people who don't take the information or make the most of the opportunities that they have when they're in my studio. And it happens, where some people's passion level isn't really what they thought it was going to be, and the end result maybe isn't neither the work that should be done, and consequently maybe the success that they had hoped for doesn't come till maybe later, and they decide to bear down again and get more serious, dig a little deeper. But it is satisfying, though, to feel like you've had some hand in seeing somebody create an exciting life ahead of success and happiness.
Yeah, I think that's every teacher's dream, is to be a part of that journey and knowing that you had a hand.
But I don't like to keep score. I don't like to say I own it. I don't want, I'm proud of what my students have done, and like I said, I know I have a part in it, but I kind of like to stay humble about it, because without their talent, without their dedication and their work and passion for it, I could be the greatest teacher in the whole world, and it's still not gonna happen for someone who doesn't have that. So they own it.
It always takes two. So it sounds like the bulk of your commitment will be at Juilliard, at least for this coming year. So for this next question, let's focus on that. What ensembles are there for horn players to participate in?
Well, there's so many opportunities at Juilliard, and I'm really happy to say that it's a great program. Like every school, it evolves over time, and schools are always honing and fine-tuning their programs, in step with the times and as the approach to education changes. And I think it's a very different place than when I went to, and it's a very different place than when I started teaching there 12 years ago. So the opportunities are many. Some of this is the same you would find at any conservatory, but of course the Juilliard Orchestra, which is the principal big orchestra, and David Robertson is the music director. For those people who don't know David, he's an internationally renowned conductor. It's great being in New York that we have, conductors who make New York their home base. So having someone like David sign on to be the music director while he goes around and he guest conducts major orchestras around the world, it's fantastic for the students to have somebody on that level. And with those kind of connections, they also get great guest conductors, because it is New York, and so many conductors do come through to be guest conductors at places like the Met or the New York Philharmonic. So Juilliard is able to engage many of those conductors to do concerts with Juilliard Orchestra. There's a wind ensemble, so that if a student's maybe not assigned to a rotation in the Juilliard Orchestra, wind ensemble is a great opportunity. We get some of the major principal, woodwind players from the New York Philharmonic, from the Met Opera, to lead those performances. They do great repertoire, and so that's a performance opportunity maybe when someone may not be assigned to the orchestra cycle. There's a contemporary ensemble, of course, also runs coincidentally with the other ensembles, hence the need for 16 horns. There's some crossover with the Juilliard Jazz Department, led by Wynton Marsalis, and so they do play with that ensemble, as even in the horn department where there's a call for need for French horns. There's a conducting lab, which is part of the conductor's conducting program, again led by David Robertson, who teaches and coaches the conducting students, but of course they need an orchestra, and so students fill out that orchestra, and I think for many of them it's a paid service that they do for the school, maybe part of a work-study program, or just engaged at some kind of hourly rate. Then Juilliard has what they call Juilliard 415, which is an early music ensemble. It's an amazing program for the horn players. First of all, they have all the reproductions of Baroque instruments, classical instruments, the solo instruments, hand horn, natural horns of the day. If you're enrolled in that course by semester, I believe, but it runs throughout the school year, you get horn lessons with Todd Williams, is a resident natural horn expert, and students get access to those instruments. They get lessons with him, and it's a performing ensemble. It's not just a performing ensemble in New York, but they also fairly regularly go on tour. In recent years, just since COVID, I know they've been to London and they've been to Amsterdam. Might be over the Easter holiday or time like that, but they'll rehearse the program and take it on the road. There's chamber music, of course, and that's really driven by the students. If there's a group and repertoire that you want to program, you sign up for it as a course. You can find your own coach. It could be split too, where you might have two coaches. If there's two different people, especially in a mixed ensemble like horn and strings, you might prefer to have split the time with string coach too, just an interesting way of they organize that. But every group, part of the prerequisite, if you sign up for chamber music, is you have to perform it by the end of the semester. So it's not just for the fun of it. You've got to commit as a group that you're going to take it all the way to performance. There's a very strong opera department at Juilliard too, so they run operas fully staged every year. And they also might be doing opera scenes, more maybe not complete operas, but they need an orchestra, and Juilliard students fill the ranks of that orchestra. And then lastly, the other opportunity for performances is the relationship between the college division and the pre-college division, where college students have the opportunity to work on a Saturday program in the pre-college with the high school students to be mentors. It means sitting in with the orchestra, maybe filling out the section or playing alongside them, coaching them through the orchestra rehearsals, as well as there's a program called MAP, which serves the community that's less well served by classical music. And so those students, will even mentor those students in the MAP program, again, by sitting in on some of the ensembles and even giving them lessons, private lessons. So there are a lot of opportunities for performing at Juilliard. It's kind of overwhelming, really.
Wow, that is a huge amount of opportunity, and it's exciting to hear that there is a wind ensemble. When I was a student there, we did, I believe, one wind ensemble project, and it was when there basically, I think, was a string orchestra during the regular orchestra cycle, and so the winds and brass had nothing to do, and so we did our own program that was all wind ensemble music, and it was one of the most fun concerts I played while I was there. So it's exciting that they have that for sure. Also, the lab orchestra, for anybody, even at Juilliard right now, if you haven't done the lab orchestra, or if you're considering becoming a student at any college that has a lab orchestra, I just wanted to advocate for a minute. A 100% recommendation to consider doing something like that. When I did the lab orchestra at Juilliard, when Alan Gilbert was running it, it was just outstanding. I just couldn't believe how much I learned about being a musician from watching other people who didn't have to hold an instrument learn how to think and move like a musician. It was akin to like an acting class or a dance class in certain ways. And it was a beautiful way, I think, of learning about music. Yeah, major advocate for that.
100% agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I remember being in my day at Juilliard. They called it conductors orchestra, and it was really mostly filled by the freshmen. And to watch then the director of the conducting department was a gentleman named Sixten Ehrling, who had really quite a career. He was an old man when I was there, but he later told me after I graduated, we were chatting, and he had prepared the chorus for the opera Rosenkavalier for Strauss in like the early 1940s, and he had conducted at the Met. He was music director of the Detroit Symphony early in his career. But to watch somebody like that, and with his dedication to teaching, to conducting students, you learn so much. Just I didn't have any aspirations about becoming conductor, but as you said, you learn so much about music, the art of conducting, and when you understand what they're up against better, when you're sitting then facing a conductor, you understand better how to read body language and what makes a great conductor and maybe what makes them not so great. And I had the same experience too as a student. I went to the Pierre Monteux Domain School up in the coast of Maine. Pierre Monteux was the conductor who premiered The Rite of Spring, and then immigrated to this country, became music director of San Francisco Symphony, but a legendary conductor, going back, more than 100 years. But that school still exists, and it's basically a conductor's school. But I was young. It was just my first year in college in the summer, and we were, the lab orchestra, and we went through a ton of repertoire, which was my interest that summer, was just to learn as much of their orchestra repertoire as possible. But to see one of Monteux's protégés, who was an old man at that point, but who had learned from the master himself, and for him, he engaged not just the conductors, but he sat right behind the horns, and he would ask you questions about the score, he would ask you questions about the piece, and it made you sit up and think. It wasn't just to sit there and sight read all summer. So, But yeah, lab orchestra is a really important thing, I think, from experience for anybody, opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, now that we've had a chance to learn a little bit about the schools that you teach at, let's focus on you. Can you tell me why you decided to play the horn?
I'm laughing because the very short answer is the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. You weren't expecting that,
No,
were you?
no.
And I don't know if the students today who are still in high school would know what the Rocky and Bullwinkle show is, but you can Google it.
I'm sure YouTube
or you
can
can
help
probably find it on some streaming service. But when I was a little kid, that was the Saturday morning cartoon that we would get up early to watch. And the long version of that, and hopefully not too long version of this story, is that my dad, before he became a psychiatrist, was a professional jazz player from high school through medical school, college, and he was able to make his way financially through medical school because he was gigging on weekends and whenever he could. And he was a union member and all that. Anyway, he, as a jazz trumpet player, he had also picked up a French horn because occasionally there would be a ballad in the big band he was playing in, and he would cover like a horn solo in it. So fast forward to now, I'm 5 years old, and my older brother's like 6.5. We're pretty close in age. And we dig out on the bottom of his closet these instruments that he hadn't played in years by that point. And the connection to Rocky and Bullwinkle. There was a cartoon on the Rocky and Bullwinkle show called The Hunter. And at the start of that cartoon, this character called The Hunter would whip out a French horn and say, "I am the hunter." And he would make this elephant call on the French horn. So that became the game between my older brother and I. Being so close in age, we were competitive. And I made about the only thing I could do better than my older brother was make that elephant call from the hunter. So the horn became my instrument, the trumpet became his. The other reason why I ended up playing horn is probably not an unusual story. I was really studying piano, though. I played horn in the band, but I only had a fingering chart. But I continued with piano lessons until ninth grade. My piano teacher had young kids, and she had pared down her teaching to the point she just said, "I'm going to take a break from teaching." And so I had no piano teacher, and I was kind of devastated. But I also wasn't really that outstanding a talent on the keyboard. So my dad said, "Well, if you're not going to take piano lessons, Amir, why don't you take horn lessons?" And so I was like, okay. But that was the magic. That was like that special moment in one's life that changes your whole life, and you wouldn't even know
And
it.
we're all very grateful as horn players.
Yeah, that first teacher, who was brilliant, he got me ready in 6 months to audition for the youth orchestra. And once I joined an orchestra, I was like, this is way better than band horn parts. And that was the beginning of the end. And yeah, that's what got me where I am.
Oh, exciting. Yeah, I also quit the piano and took up the horn. I found my calling for sure. So why did you decide to start teaching at the collegiate level?
Good question. Because I really do enjoy teaching at every level. And as I just mentioned, how important my first teacher was to me, while I teach really just at the collegiate level, I have such reverence and appreciation when a talented student auditions to be in my studio at, let's say, Juilliard, that that there was somebody who did, in most cases, just a great job in getting somebody started. So I wish I had time in my schedule and I have occasionally taken on a high school student. I did during COVID times, and earlier, before I joined the Met, I taught a couple of high school students. One's in the LA Philharmonic now, and the other one's playing first horn in Germany. I enjoy being that teacher who helps them get off to that great start and fuels that passion for all things horn. But I think that what ends up happening, at least once my performing career sort of became the focus of my professional life, that what I developed over the course of having an orchestral career is a really specialized education myself and knowledge that I've acquired about the orchestral repertoire. And at least in this country, let's face it, that's where probably the majority of the jobs are for a horn player as a performer. There's the world of education too. But so I feel like working with students at the collegiate level, first of all, they've already made that decision that they want to make this their life's work. So there's a level of commitment that you don't always get from a high school student, understandably, because they're still figuring out what they're going to do in college, and they might be very divided with a very strong academic interest in something else. So you get students who are a little more single-minded, singular with their focus and their energy, which is great, because then you really can see the progress happen quickly, and it's engaging for me to feel like talking to somebody who feels the same way about the music that I get to play in the professional life. So that's really how I think it came to be.
So it's clear to me that you have this great love for teaching. Is there an experience that you feel shaped you the most as a teacher?
Well, yeah, of course, giving back for all of the teachers who gave so much to me is part of it. Feeling of like, I know what they meant to me, and I'd like to mean the same to my students. So I also know personally that a professional career as a performer in music, as a horn player, is a tough road. It can be. And my teachers were there for me. They helped me prepare for that. Some of them helped me through those times. So it's really, again, rewarding to me to feel like giving of myself can make a difference in somebody's life like that. So, that ends up being, the things that I took from my experience as a student and are affecting me to this day as a teacher.
You talk a little bit about your past teachers and the inspiration that they mean to you. Do you have any particular people that you feel strongly are your horn heroes?
Well, I grew up in New York. I went to Juilliard in the late 70s, early 80s. So my horn heroes, again, because I came to the horn sort of late. I started in the middle of ninth grade with lessons and sat in an orchestra for the first time in 10th grade. I had 3 years of that in high school and 3 glorious summers also at Kinhaven. I wouldn't be a musician today, I don't think, professionally, if I hadn't gone to Kinhaven, which is a camp in Vermont, by the way, for those who don't know. It still exists and still a magical place. But my horn heroes were then those players that I heard. It was the New York Philharmonic. My parents and grandparents were subscribers going back decades. So it was really probably as a performer, it was John Terminaro, who was the principal horn. I caught the tail end of his career as principal horn in New York because he left to become principal in L.A. in 1979, I think. So it inspired me to seek him out at Aspen Festival to study with him. My other horn heroes at the time were my own teacher, who became my teacher at Juilliard, Rainier Diantenis, who was the third horn of the orchestra a long time, going back, I think he started in 1950, and I actually won his job when he retired in 1993. So he was a horn hero. The associate principal at the New York Philharmonic at the time was a guy who's lesser known. His name was Martin Smith. Sad to say, died young, no longer with us. So Martin and John were they occupied the principal chair, splitting it. But I heard Martin play some just glorious concerts, inspired me. I did spend a summer studying with him at a summer music festival. And then when I was still at Juilliard is when Phil Myers joined the orchestra. And, I think he played a solo piece with the orchestra in his first month, a piece by William Schumann. I don't think that, sadly, that's made it into the repertoire, but it's an interesting piece, and I still remember his performance of that. It was really impressed me, so he sort of ended up on the horn hero list. The other ones are probably not so much a surprise. I was lucky enough, my parents would split a box to hear the Chicago Symphony series at Carnegie Hall. That used to come a couple times a year, do each visit a couple of different programs, and it was the era of Schulte and the legendary brass players. So, Dale Clevenger was certainly on my list of heroes. And then just, in the age of recordings, from records I had my heroes, and it's always has been and always will be Dennis Brain. How can it not be? Most of my teachers had studied with James Chambers, who was the previous principal horn at the Philharmonic. He had already retired from playing in the late 60s, so I never got to hear him play live, but from recordings, yeah, he was a role model or an inspiration to me. And then the other soloist international on the horn that came into my view, whose recordings I wore out, were certainly Bauman's. Gerd Seifert was also, he made many, fine recordings, not just in the orchestra with Berlin Philharmonic. He was principal horn. Well, he overlapped with Stefan Dorr as the principal horn, but, he really did turn out some great solo albums. There's a guy that, sad to say, many young players today don't know this name. James Stagliano was principal horn at the Boston Symphony. Again, before my time, really. I think he was under Munch and then under Steinberg and maybe early part of Seiji Ozawa's tenure as music director in Boston. But he put out some beautiful solo albums. You can find those on YouTube. And incredible high chops, but a very lyrical player. Beautiful. And maybe my favorite horn record of all time, are the two Czech brothers, Bedřich and Zdeněk Tilsar. I'm half Czech. I should know how to pronounce that correctly, but I might have botched it just now. But they, along with another one of their countrymen in the early 90s, made a recording of the Anton Reicha trios. And it sounds like one person times three. I mean, the phrasing, the balance, the intonation, the expression, it's some of the most lyrical playing. And it takes these beautiful works, but they're not, major works in the repertoire, and makes them sound like masterpieces just because of the performance. It's just so iconic. I love them. And my recent heroes, just more since I've turned professional, of course, how could one not have admiration for Stefan Dor, Sarah Willis, Radek Babarek, and Radovan Vlatkovic, who I'm happy to say, Radovan spends the last 3 years a week every semester at Juilliard in residence, and it's a great opportunity for students too. Our students get very excited always about those weeks because he's magical. He's a great teacher, and everyone gets lessons with him, and coachings, solo or chamber music, and there's always hangout time, and it's great to be around somebody like that. So those are my heroes.
Wow.
Long list, but
Wow, so you're pulling your inspiration from just a tremendous amount of people. So yeah, let that be a lesson to the listeners. Listen, listen, listen. I know what I'm going to do when I get home. In regards to Radovan, that's tremendously exciting for me. He is a major horn hero of mine. And I actually did get the chance to meet him at Juilliard on the street. I was walking behind this gentleman leaving the building, and I don't know why I took note of this person, but as I was walking down the street, he turned in the same direction I did, and I don't know how this is possible, but it's like the silhouette of a person. And I was walking down into the subway right outside of Juilliard, and I took a few quick steps, and I tried to peek back up through the railing, and I just caught the side of somebody's face, and I thought to myself, I think that's Radovan Vlatkovic. I swear I sprinted back up the steps, and I chased him down and tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "Excuse me, are you?" Anyway, and he was very kind. He said yes. And I asked him for a lesson on the spot, and he apologized, and he said, "I only have a few hours until it was the Chamber Music Society at Lincoln Center." He was playing the program with them that night, and invited me to the concert very kindly. But I think the Juilliard Orchestra was also playing a concert that night in one of the other halls in New York City, so I missed him, and that was my one shot. So maybe again one day.
You'll have to come visit
when
he's
like
in town, because I'm so thankful for the Juilliard administration to back this idea. I had proposed it. We had a vacancy on faculty, and so we're down to three faculty members on the horn faculty. So this is a great opportunity for the students to have someone like that to play for, and we all get excited. Most of the faculty, we show up to as many of his events as possible when he's here those weeks, and he's become a good friend, and he's really so personable. He's such a gentleman. But that's a great story, though. And so you'll have to come back. And when we get him, his schedule is free, and he might piggyback his week onto maybe what he may have then following his week at Juilliard with the Chamber Music Society at Lincoln Center. And I think that's how, but he always carves out time in his schedule for us for 3 years straight, and anticipate the same for next year. In fact, I know it's confirmed already for next year. So it's what a perk for our students. Yeah. I don't mean to get off topic too, but I'll just put in a plug for the fact that we do also have a masterclass series. I don't know if that existed when you were a student at Juilliard.
I don't think so.
But it's official now. We do 9 master classes per year. So it's almost one a month. Of course, Jen Montone, Eric Reed, and myself, we each do one, but there's 6 spots for guests that we have. And, New York being New York, we see every visiting touring orchestra comes through New York, and not to mention the resident artists that are there in New York. So it's really a diverse lineup of people, high horns, low horns, people who make their living in an orchestra, people who do other things, teaching elsewhere, whatever. But it's always an interesting lineup. It changes every year, and our students have an opportunity to sign up and participate in those master classes. So I look at the opportunities today's students at Juilliard have compared to my own experience at Juilliard, and it was just a different time. I was there for 4 years, and we never had one master class, not one. But it was education systems were different back then, and
things changed.
Yeah, things changed, but all for the better. It's great.
Absolutely. So let's get back to teaching here for a little bit. I'm curious to know, what do you like the most and the least specifically about being a college teacher?
Well, what I really plain and simple like the most about being a college teacher is helping people. it's the old cliche, the more you give, the more you get back, in a way. And so you think about giving, if you only see it as a one-way street, you're missing out on a lot, but you get so much back. And the thing about teaching is that you're planting seeds. You may not see the harvest of it for years to come, but you trust that it'll be there. But you're helping people, and as long as you're committed to it and doing your best for people on an individual basis, because no two students are alike, their needs are different. If you're doing your best for them, it's fabulously rewarding. The rewards are right there. Sometimes they're really immediate. Seeing someone like Paige just take off and then go from a high school student to a professional in 4 years in a great orchestra and, at a salary which she can support herself. It's great. What I dislike the most about teaching is, occasionally you run into students who, for whatever reason, it may be where they are in their lives, it may be temporary, or sometimes it's just built into their personality that they're not in the right mindset to really learn. All I ask of my students is to be open-minded, to hear what I have to say, and as you should with all things in life, put it to the test and give it a true test. See if it really helps you, if it makes sense to you. If it does, embrace it, and don't lose it, and don't forget it. If it doesn't, let it go. But it's people who put up walls before they've even tried it. I feel like there's no way in for me as a teacher sometimes with a student like that whose walls are too high. Of course, as a teacher, you do your effort to make them understand that they're putting up walls and try to help them to not maybe be defensive. But for some students, it's just too baked in. And it's hard enough, I always say, to teach the horn. But it's even harder when the person on the other side of the room is not necessarily receptive. That's a little hard. And you could probably help these people, and that they need your help, but the message isn't necessarily always going to get received. And that's where it's a seed that you hope will germinate maybe long after you say goodbye, I don't know. But I'm also, like I said, happy that in relationship I have with the other two faculty at Juilliard, we are really open. I might say to somebody, why don't you see what one of the other teachers has to say about this subject if you feel like what I'm telling you isn't catching wind, is not connecting for you. So we'll see. But that's the frustrating part when it's more of an attitude problem of shutting you down. It's like, that's hard.
I'm sure that'll resonate with every teacher for sure, and potentially with some students as well that might be listening. They may have just recognized for the very first time that, maybe that's me.
Yeah. Well, there's some great books about, mindset and just, how you face challenges and hurdles. It exists in every field. To be good at anything, there's always those obstacles. And so, people talk a lot more about growth mindset versus a closed mindset. And we probably all go through the days sometimes with one foot in one mindset, and how moods change throughout the day, where maybe really don't want to hear about this right now and you're shut down. But I think when you're in the studio and this is your life's work ahead and you've got someone there willing to help, that's the only thing that would be frustrating to me. Otherwise, I love everything about teaching.
Yeah, speaking of great books about that subject, there was a book that I read while I was at Juilliard by the recommendation of Noah Kageyama with his performance enhancement class called Mastery by George Leonard, I believe. I hope that's correct. It was written by an Aikido master talking about this growth mindset and something that he calls the plateau.
Right.
Yeah, if you've never read that book, I highly recommend it. It's very, very good.
And you mentioned Noah's name. I love Noah, and Noah is just such a resource for Juilliard and Juilliard students. He's a performance psychologist, and he's so insightful, and he does a great class, and he's got a great website too called the Bulletproof Musician, which I've contributed to just in interviews we've done in the past. And there's a library that I think can be accessed, and I think it's free, maybe even too.
Well, hopefully it is now.
Yeah, he's a great resource, and that's another thing I brag about Juilliard. But the enrolling in one of Noah's classes, I think, is invaluable at some point for everybody.
For sure. Well, this next question is one of my absolute favorites. What 3 words do you think your students would use to describe you as a teacher? And full disclosure, I have contacted one of your former students who shall remain anonymous and asked this same question. So we'll see how close you get.
This is like a game show. Let's see. Well, it's very hard for me to be objective about myself. especially if I'm going to focus on the positives.
It's hard for horn players,
I like to think my students think of me as caring or nurturing. I like to think that my students think of me as generally being laid back. And I like to think that my students think I'm dedicated, because I know I am, but I also know how busy my schedule it is, and I know how sometimes I get pulled in 18 different directions at once.
Wow. Well, I would go so far as to say I think you nailed it.
I did? Okay.
Yeah, you said caring, nurturing. They said supportive. You said laid back. They said patient.
Okay.
And you said dedicated. They said innovative. And I think it takes a very dedicated person to be in touch enough with what you're trying to accomplish to continue to innovate over time.
Oh, I like the innovative. That's great. That's even better than what I said. All right, that student gets an A. Whoever that was.
You can't give an A anymore. They're already done.
Okay. Now that narrows down the field. I have my suspicions who it is, but I gave her A anyway. Deservingly so.
Lips are sealed.
But yeah, no, I think that it is nice to hear, and I value those attributes, I guess, and so it's nice that it comes across. Some people, they need a taskmaster, and I think as a teacher, I always liken it to be kind of like the janitor with the key ring of 800 keys on their belt, and you got to unlock a door. The more keys you have to unlocking that door for the student, which means be able to explain, let's say, something fundamental with articulation, and explain it 18 different ways, because you just don't know which key is going to unlock it for this student. If I say it to student A this way, they might get it. And I go to student B saying exactly the same words, they don't get it, so I have to try a different key. So maybe that's where being innovative comes from. I think maybe that's the other thing I love about teaching, is it can be incredibly creative. Each student's another lock to open, and you've got to just find the right key.
Yeah, to me, the hallmark of a phenomenal teacher is in that versatility, because I believe you have to have a tremendous depth of knowledge and understanding of your craft and your ability to read other people in order to have that versatility, to explain the exact same thing in 20 different ways. Yeah, I absolutely love that. All right, well, I'm going to take this opportunity to conclude the first half of our interview, and we'll be back for part 2, and we'll see you soon.
Sorry. Did they tell you I was wordy?